This video will begin a series of tutorials on making the muscles of a paper action figure. I'll be starting with the shoulders because with the way I've designed the joints and frame, everything is built around the shoulders. And I recommend having a full body drawing of your character so you know how big each of the parts needs to be. Alrighty, let's go. Before making the shoulder muscles, you need to have a frame to attach it to. So you'll need a T-joint. If you don't know how to do that, I have a video up here that can show you. I tried to make the joint as big as possible while still fitting inside my character's proportions. So the shoulder joint I've made is 2.3 centimeters wide, with the pin's first layer being 2.3 centimeters, the second layer being 1.7 centimeters, and the pivot being 1.2 centimeters wide. It's important for the pin to be as wide as the actual part it's moving, so you have a solid point to grab onto when articulating the shoulder. And the lever is about 2 centimeters long. It doesn't matter too much though, since you can always adjust the length of this even after the model's completed. Just make it at least long enough to reach the center of the body. Now this character I'm making has some pretty massive deltoids that attach at a rather drastic angle on his body. So this part of the joint here is actually going to have a starting position at an angle of about 45 degrees, so that the joint is as close to the beginning of the muscle as possible. This is so the shoulder looks more natural when bending up and to give some room for the lateral deltoid muscle that will attach to the side later. It's also more accurate to real human joints. And now that this piece of card is sticking out, you want to cut it and fold the end of it down so the end is perpendicular with the lever here. This will give a flat surface for the arm to glue into, making that whole process easier later. So you're left with something like this. And so now I can see that it lines up perfectly with my drawing. With the end of the lever being at the center of the body, the pin of the shoulder being at the beginning of the shoulder's muscles where I want it to move, and the point where the card is folded down lining up with the end of the shoulder muscles. Now you'll need a second joint for the elbow, and like the shoulder joint, you want it as large as possible since bigger joints make for stronger articulation. So my character's elbow is 1.2 centimeters wide, so that's the width of the pin's first layer, with the second layer being just 9 millimeters, and the pivot being just a millimeter narrower at 8 millimeters. As I mentioned in my T-joint tutorial, this is to allow for the glue to overflow slightly without accidentally sticking to the pivot. And the lever here is just a rigid shape with a tube glued between the piece of card wrapped around the pivot, so I'm going to wrap it with another layer of paper to create the smoother surface needed. And next I wrap another tube of paper around the lever. This is what will make the arm swivel. And then I grab some double-sided tape to stick around that tube and just stick it inside the piece of card on the shoulder joint. And so now here's what I mean when I say it has a nice flat surface to just slot into while keeping the angle that you want of the shoulder. And I'm just going to make whatever cuts I think are necessary to get the card to cleanly wrap around the tube here. This part I might actually just cut off entirely. Then I just add a little bit of glue around here to ensure it stays there. Okay, so with just this one piece of card here connecting the shoulder to the arm, it's quite flimsy and doesn't feel like it will stay attached. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab another piece of card to fold around the underside here. The bottom of this card extending down and wrapping around the tube here. And then I add as much glue as possible to every gap I can find before wrapping this part around the shoulder joint. And then I use sticky tape to pull everything tight together and keep it in place. And once this piece of card is firmly attached around the shoulder joint, cut out a little chunk of it here so the shoulder joint can actually fold down and move the way it is supposed to. And then I wrap this tube here that will become the upper arm with another layer of paper to further hold everything in place. And so now you have your elbow bend and the upper arm swivel, all set. And the elbow joint's lever is only being held into the upper arm by friction. It can literally just slide out. Oh, and the arm being able to slide down for the shoulder like this is what allows you to hide the joints while the arm is straight, and also gives you some extra movement when bending the arm upward. I'm really fond of this design. I think it's pretty cool. Step 3 is pretty straightforward. You have your wrist joint that will be made pretty long and thin, with the pivot being 4 millimeters wide here, and the lever being 2.5 centimeters long. And just like the elbow, you wrap the lever of the wrist joint with another tube of paper for the wrist to slide into. and that tube will just be glued into the piece of card on the elbow joint. I just use my trusty double-sided tape and glue combination, and it will be stuck in there. And then just pull it tight. I like to wrap a piece of sticky tape around here to keep it shape. And now you can see the shape of the forearm is already coming through. Alright, so that's it. That's how I connect the various T-joints I make into an arm. Next time, I will finally show you how I make the muscles.